I want to take a little time now to talk to you about what, for me, at this point in my life, lies at the very heart of this practice. And to understand that, I think it's good to step back a step and look at the tradition from which this practice was born, the tradition of Taoism. And Yin Yoga is unique in the yoga world, I think, in one way, or in many ways. But one way is that there's no one in charge. There's no guru. There's nobody telling us how we have to practice or what parts of the practice should be important to us. So we all get to decide what has real heart and meaning for us in the practice. And when we look at the philosophy of Taoism, we see, of course, that it started thousands of years ago, deep in the hill country of China. And the first writing about Taoism was, of course, done by Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching. And in it, he outlines the basic premises of the Taoist view of the world and how we fit into the world. And of course, he begins with the concept of the Tao itself. And the Tao itself is a very complex and subtle concept. But one of the aspects of it, that one of the meanings of it, is that it means the place that we all began, that place of nothingness from which the cosmos were created. So Lao Tzu speaks of the place of the Tao from which all else sprang. So from this place of nothingness came the universe, came the cosmos themselves. But one thing about the Taoist philosophy that for me is so beautiful is the recognition of relationship within the manifested universe. In other words, from a Taoist point of view, when the universe sprang into its existence, it held and holds within it these two archetypal concepts of yin and yang. And when I speak of an archetypal concept or an archetype, what I mean is that particular thing which represents a universal truth. So yin and yang are in themselves particular concepts, but within them are represented many universal truths. And one of the most important for me is the idea of relationship. Because everything that's created in the cosmos is created within this apparent duality of yin and yang. So what sprang from the place of nothingness sprang into this place of apparent duality. But behind it, we know, lies the unity of the Tao itself. So from this place of nothing, from this place where there is no difference between this or that, or right or wrong, this place of beyond duality came the apparent duality of the cosmos themselves. And the truth of that duality is held in these archetypes of yin and yang. And yin and yang are not separate from each other. Everything in the cosmos contains these two archetypes. But some aspects of the cosmos move more towards one archetype than another. Although all aspects of the cosmos contain both. Yin and yang do not exist without each other. So if we take a very simple idea, say the idea of temperature, and we look at it in relation to these archetypes, we see that temperature is made up of hot and cold. Well, hot and cold, clearly that concept doesn't exist outside of that relationship. In other words, nothing can be hot unless something else is cold. As Lao Tzu says, there's no such thing as good without bad. When something becomes beautiful, something else becomes ugly. So within this beautiful apparent duality of yin and yang lies this very important truth that all of the cosmos is in relationship. Yin and yang are only terms of relationship. We could say, from a traditional point of view, that the temperature hot is a yang temperature, the temperature of burning, of drive, of aggression. All those things lie on the yang side, whereas the cooler temperatures lie on the yin side. But of course, warm water is more yin, than boiling hot water. But it's more yang than cold water. So warm water is yin in relation to hot water, to boiling water, and yang in relation to cold water. So you see, in fact, it doesn't exist without its relationship. And of course, when we see that truth, we see also that, of course, good doesn't exist without bad. Up doesn't exist without down. Happy doesn't exist without sad. Life doesn't exist without death. And of course, I don't exist without you. In this simple concept of the cosmos lies this universal truth that we're all connected, that we're all dependent and intertwined with each other. And of course, this is also a central belief and truth of Buddhism. The concept of emptiness says exactly the same thing, that nothing is true in itself. There is no inherent reality. All reality occurs within relationship. Good isn't good except in its relationship with bad. So in this simple way of seeing the cosmos, of this apparent duality, lie these truths, that nothing exists without everything else, that all affects each other. So this beautiful truth is held there. And we know also that these, not only do yin and yang create each other, the same way you and I create each other, but they also control each other. As something becomes hotter, it becomes less cold. So all the time the cosmos are looking to find this balance within these archetypes of yin and yang. But when we can look at how these archetypes more strongly influence one part of the cosmos or one part of our world than they do another, we can say, I'm sure you've looked at it from a physical point of view within the practice and seen how those more active parts of our body, the muscles, are more yang. They need more heat. They need more drive. They need more aggression. Whereas the more yin parts of our body, the bones and connective tissue, those cooler, gentler, slower moving parts of the body act very differently. And we can see that the body is made up of these aspects of the body which lean more towards one archetype than another. They are never exclusively in one archetype because, of course, the archetypes exist only within their relationship. So we can see how the cosmos falls into these kind of camps. But one aspect of the Yin archetype is apparent when we look very deeply at it. We can say that the gentler parts of the cosmos, the slower, the more accepting parts of the cosmos, the more feminine parts of the cosmos lie in the yin aspects. Whereas the more aggressive, the hotter, those parts of the world that need to move and change things lie more in the yang camp, in the yang aspect of the universe. And these are the more masculine aspects of ourselves. Now, of course, it's very easy to get confused and think that the physical aspects of the thing make it exclusively on one side or the other. Because we're born in a masculine body or a feminine body does not change the balance within our hearts and our minds. that aspect of our life is clearly an illusion, a delusion. So when we look deeply at this aspect of yin, at this archetype of yin, we see that at its very heart, at least I see at its very heart, is the archetype of the mother herself. And when we look at what lies in the heart of the mother, we see so clearly that what lies at in that place is unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. When we peel back all the layers of what the archetype means, at its very center, at its very heart, is the heart of the mother. And I remember the Dalai Lama telling a story about one time he was on an airplane and he was sitting across the aisle from a young family. And there was a father and a mother and a small child, about 1.5 or 2 years old. And the Dalai Lama said that during the daytime, he watched as the father walked patiently with the child up and down the aisle and laughed and read books to him and all. But as evening fell, the father fell asleep. And all through the night, the Dalai Lama said he watched as the mother patiently took the little child for a walk, patiently sat with the child as it whimpered and cried. And he said, you know, I don't think I would have had the patience to sit with that child all night. He said, I think that one night of a mother with a sick child is worth more than 40 years in a monastery. In other words, he says that at the heart of that mother is an unconditional love, an unconditional acceptance that 40 years in a monastery, he was convinced wouldn't have gotten him. And I've been very, very fortunate over the last 20 some years to been involved with the Tibetan refugee children throughout the world, and particularly in India. And about 10 years ago or so, my wife and I were invited to the Dalai Lama's house in Dharamsala to talk to him about the project that we had been doing with the Tibetan children. And we asked him to give us a name for our sponsorship project. And he gave us the name Jamse. And Jamse means kindness in Tibetan. It's made of 2 words, Jam and Se, which means love and care. So, of course, in the Tibetan definition of kindness lies the love and care. Kindness isn't just an emotion, it's an action as well from a Tibetan point of view. So I had heard him say over and over that his religion isn't Buddhism, it's kindness. And so I asked him, Your Holiness, where did you learn kindness? And he said, I learned it from my mother. He said, when I was a baby, she would carry me on her shoulders and I would grab one ear and the other. And then when I wanted to go one direction, I would pull on one of her ears. And if I wanted to go the other way, I'd pull on the other ear. And he said, you know, one time I pulled so hard that her ear started to bleed, but she never said a word. Always unconditional acceptance and unconditional love. And the thing that astonishes me so much about this is that this man was taken from his family at the age of 5 and taught by the most advanced lamas, the Buddhist lamas and teachers. But the core of his teaching, what he feels is the essence of his religion, he learned before the age of 5 from his mother. And he learned it because of that unconditional love and that unconditional compassion and acceptance that she gave to him. So for me, when we look at this beautiful practice of Yin Yoga and all the good it can do our physical body and all the ways that it can move energy in the body, all these beautiful and necessary things, when we look at what possibilities it really holds for the world, the greatest possibility, the deepest possibility is this invitation that lies at the heart of the Yin archetype, which is to access the unconditional love and acceptance which lies at the center of every human heart. And so I think, okay, this beautiful practice, which at its depth acknowledges the possibility of unconditional love. How does this practice, how can it actually help us to open to that? How can it help us to open to more acceptance in our life, acceptance for ourselves and for, of course, the world? Well, I know you've learned a lot about that this week. These weeks, excuse me. And of course, one of the aspects, the beautiful aspects of the practice is the attitude that we bring to it. Now, of course, the Yin practice is moving because we don't have a guru, because we don't have someone telling us who we should be. It moves in a wide spectrum between very restorative to much more active yoga. But at its essence, one of the most important aspects of it is the attitude that we bring towards it, to it. And that's the attitude of non-striving. And non-striving is the same thing as acceptance. So what we're really trying to bring to the practice is the attitude of acceptance. There's a very big difference between going into a practice or a project or anything in our lives and saying, I'm not good enough. If only I could do a deeper forward bend. If only I could look like the cover of your yoga journal. This attitude, no matter what our practice or no matter what we're doing in our life, this is a toxic attitude. This way of approaching ourselves is so much of what's causing suffering in the world, this inability to accept ourselves as we are. And of course, there's pressure, societal pressure all around us to be different, to have fancier clothes, to have a new car, to smell different, all these ways of being that aren't good enough because the marketplace needs us to have that attitude. But all of this affects us. And what we've learned more and more in our practices is how closely the body's health and body's ease is connected to the attitude that we bring to it. When we bring an attitude of acceptance, we can feel it in our practice as the body begins to let go and the body begins to relax. Because what we know is that every cell of the body, every molecule of the body has its own intelligence. And that intelligence is absorbing what's happening in our life, particularly the information that we're passing to it. So when we bring an attitude of wishing our body was different, wishing things were different, regretting the way we are, that the body listens to it and it holds that truth, that what it thinks to be the truth. And, you know, we see this, we see the psychiatrists, especially around traumatic stress. We see how the psychologists are beginning to recognize this more and more deeply. But we can also turn to that beautiful work of Dr. Dr. Emoto from Japan, who did this beautiful work with water, which I'm sure you've seen, where he took water crystals and subjected them to different attitudes, even the simple things of writing words and taping them on the sides of these jars of distilled water. And saying certain things to the water and watching the shape of the water crystals change. And of course, we know that our body is 70% water, the same as the earth is 70% water. So every time we go into a posture and we say to our body, gee, I need to work harder because I want to look like the person on the mat next to me, the body hears that. And every molecule of the body absorbs that. One of the most beautiful pictures I've seen of these crystals is a picture taken of a crystal from a polluted river in Japan that looks all brown and deformed. And then they took a Buddhist monk who prayed over that same water. And then they took a picture, and it showed this beautifully formed symmetrical crystal versus this lump of brown. And so what I'm saying is that part of what brings us back to a place of acceptance within the Yin practice is when we make every practice, every posture a prayer. When we make every posture a prayer of thankfulness, of gratitude, the body hears that, and the body will shift, the body will change, the body will heal itself. So one of the ways this beautiful practice brings us to this place of acceptance, which lies at the heart of the Yin archetype, is through this beautiful attitude that we can bring to the practice. Make every posture a prayer. Make every posture an offering of gratitude. And that will change what's happening in your physical and in your mental states. And this helps to bring the physical and mental body, the mind and the body, into alignment. And begins to help us let go of the stories which we carry that are no longer serving us. These stories that are held in every molecule, every cell of the human body. So one way that we bring the acceptance through this practice is by the very attitude that we bring to the mat with us. And that's hugely important. But there's another aspect which I think a lot about. And Lao Tzu wrote the first works about Taoism, where he explained the general premise. But it's believed that he wrote a second work called the Hua Wu Ching that was just recently brought out of China through oral transmission. And in it, he speaks more specifically about paths that we can take to bring us back in alignment with the Tao itself. From a Taoist point of view, to return to our hearts, to fulfill the potential that we have of being loving and compassionate human beings, means to come into alignment with the Tao itself. To come into alignment with the Tao means to move with the flow, the actual true flow of life, the flow that's within you, the flow that your heart is inviting you to follow. And in this book, the Hua Wu Ching, Lao Tzu begins with this sutra. He says, I teach the integral way of uniting with the great and mysterious Tao. My teaching is simple. If you try to make a science or religion of it, it will elude you. Simple yet profound, it includes the entire truth of the universe. For those who want to understand the truth, take joy in the work and service that comes to you. Having completed it, take joy in cleansing and feeding yourself. Having taken care of others, then yourself, then turn to the master for instruction. This simple path leads to peace, virtue, and abundance. So Lao Tzu is saying, I teach the integral way of uniting with the great and mysterious Tao. The word integral means complete into itself. Nothing is missing. In other words, he says, I teach the complete way of uniting with the great and mysterious Tao. I teach the entire way of coming back to who you truly are, coming back to your heart, coming back to alignment with the rest of the cosmos. He says, my teaching is simple. If you try to make a science or religion of it, it will elude you. In other words, if you try to control it, if you try to say what it should be, it will disappear. In the same way that he begins, that Lao Tzu begins the Tao Te Ching by saying the words that can be spoken are not the true words. once we, from a Taoist tradition, once we try to corral and hang on to these truths, they begin to lose their absolute truth. So he says, my teaching is simple. If you try to make a science or religion of it, it will elude you. Simple yet profound. It includes the entire truth of the universe. So it's a pretty big statement. He teaches this simple truth, which is the entire truth of the universe. And he says, for those who want to understand the truth, take joy in the work and service that comes to you. He says very clearly, in the work and service that comes to you, not necessarily the work and service you choose to do in the world. Sometimes those things which we have to serve come to us uninvited. We may end up having to take care of people or things that we didn't think our life would be about, but it comes to us. And so Lao Tzu is take joy in that work and service that comes to you. Take joy in serving the world. And then he says, only after that, take joy in cleansing and feeding yourself. And this is a very interesting way of putting it. The cleansing and feeding yourself, the most basic of human needs, perhaps. And he's saying, take joy in being a human being. Take joy in being born into this human body. Taoist tradition is really about living our life. It's not about sitting on a cushion and getting above the trials and tribulations of life. It's about diving into life and about really living. So he says, take joy in being a human being after you take care of others. And then, once you've taken care of others, then yourself, then turn to the master for instruction. Well, when we look at this from a modern Western point of view, it seems to be the opposite of what we are always being told, which is first, find someone to tell you how to be in your life, or go to a bookstore and get a self-help book. Then take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself and if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. I don't know who made that up, but and then only after that, then take care of others. But Lao Tzu is saying the opposite. He's saying, no, take care of other people first, then take care of yourself. And only after that, then go take a yoga class. Now, admittedly, for yoga teachers, this is a very bad marketing idea, right? A bad advertisement. Don't come to our class, just go feed people. Well, that's actually, of course, what a lot of teachers have always said, Jesus being one of them. But so he's saying what we think of as almost backwards. And then it's easy to say, yeah, but you need to take care of yourself. Well, of course you need to take care of yourself. That becomes very clear and very obvious when you begin to dedicate your life to something outside of yourself. For instance, in this country, we have a thing called Meals on Wheels, and my wife used to drive for it. And what it means is that you take your car and you pick up food from the facility or whatever, and you drive it to people's houses who are sick or are old. So you take them meals and you go inside their house and you give them a meal. And so they have a hot meal once a day because someone drives the meal to them. And they're all volunteers that do this work. Well, of course, to do that, you have to have a car, and you have to put gasoline in the car, and you have to put oil in the car, and you have to have a driver's license, and you have to pay your insurance. And what Lao Tzu is saying, yeah, of course you have to take care of your car. You have to put oil in the car the same way that you have to feed yourself, and you have to cleanse yourself, and you have to keep yourself healthy. But do it so that you can take meals for other people. He's not saying, oh no, don't take care of your car. Because of course, if you don't take care of your car, you can't take a meal to someone who needs a meal. But the reason to take care of your car That's the important thing. Take care of your cards so that you can take a meal to someone who needs it. Come to your yoga mat so that you can leave the yoga studio a kinder person, a more gentle, a more compassionate person, so that you can feed people in whatever way they need feeding. So, and he says, this simple path leads to peace, virtue, and abundance. And this is really interesting, the way he says it. It leads to peace, so that we can be at peace with ourselves, that we can be at peace with the world. It leads to virtue. And this is an interesting word, because this is a translation of the Chinese word te, T-E or D-E, sometimes spelled, which means it means virtue, but it means a different virtue than we think of in the English language anyway. It means the type of virtue that you find in a healing plant. For instance, a healing plant doesn't say, hey, I'm a healing plant. Get me at the local store for only $1. Or look at me, I'm better than all the plants around me because I'm a healing plant. No, a healing plant heals by the virtue of being exactly who it is, being what it is. A Taoist would say, if you think you're virtuous, you stink of virtue. That virtue is not, virtue is a way of being in the world. And when we are who we truly are, when we live our lives through our hearts, that's the healing that virtue brings. So he's saying this path brings you peace within yourself and peace, a feeling of peace in your life. But it also brings you back to who you truly are, because from that place, your healing comes. And that's what virtue means. And he says it brings you peace, virtue, and abundance. And that's another interesting choice of words, because abundance means that what we have is enough. It doesn't mean that we have a lot or that we have everything we think we want. It means that that what we have is enough for us. It's the same as acceptance. It's the same as equanimity. So what he's saying is, when you dedicate your life, your practice, to something outside yourself, when you leave your house in the morning so that you can be kinder and so that you can create a better world, everything begins to fall into place. That self-acceptance comes, that the sense of peace comes, and the ability to accept what is true in our life. So what I'm really saying is that the real power, one of the greatest powers of this practice, from my point of view, is this ability to invite us to return to the essence of that archetype, which is unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. And the path there is not only through the postures themselves, where we bring that attitude to the posture itself. And by doing that, we actually can change the chemical composition of our bodies. We can actually change the relationship between our mind and the cells and the molecules of our body. But we also have the possibility of dedicating our practice to something else, to making every posture a prayer. And when we do that, then we're serving the world. And when we're serving the world, of course, we're serving ourselves. Because what we see when we dedicate ourselves to something greater than ourselves is that line between self and others begins to gently begin to disintegrate. It begins to blur. And the idea of doing something of ourselves being separate from others begins to disappear. So of course we're going to treat ourselves as well as we treat others, because that line disappears. It's not a matter of, oh, take care of yourself so you can take care of others, or just take care of others and become a martyr and don't take care of yourself. No, when we really dedicate ourselves to this kind of practice, those lines disappear. And that no longer, it becomes a ridiculous question to say, oh, well, should I take care of myself or should I take care of others? Well, there's no difference. Of course I'm going to get a good car so I can go take care of other people, not so I can have a better car than my neighbor, but so I can go take care of other people. I come to my mat and I stay healthy so that I can take care of other people. That's all. It's very simple. The invitation is to make everything we do in our life a prayer. And there's another aspect of this practice, which I love so much, and it comes from the gift of the practice of the freedom that it gives us to not control us, to not tell us that these practices have to be done this way. And it comes from my greatest teacher, I would say, at this point. I've been very fortunate to have one teacher for the last 5 years. She turns 6 in April, so she's my granddaughter, Ozma, and she lives in a farm right down the road from me, so I see her almost every day. And we're very close. And a couple of years ago, maybe last year, before I was headed for Europe, she came up to me, and when she has something serious to say, her brow gets furrowed and she looks very serious. She's got curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes. And so she came up to me, and when she's serious, she always starts this way. She said, Biff, would you like to have a town of your own? And I said, well, that sounds very nice. Yeah, it sounds nice. And she said, well, you have one. You have a little town in your heart already. And anytime you feel sad, or anytime anybody tells you to do something you don't want to do, you can always go back to the little town in your heart. And I was so touched. And of course, as we all are, when we've sat in front of our teacher, we have to go meditate for a while to try to figure out what it meant. So I thought about it for a while. And I went to Europe, and I was somewhere, and I shared this with my class. I said, my teacher has invited us to go back to the little town in our heart whenever we feel sad. Or of course, I love it from a 5-year-old. She says, whenever you feel sad, or when someone tells you to do something you don't want to do. This, of course, is part of her world. So anyway, I told my class, and I wrote to my daughter-in-law, Jennifer, and I said, I told my class this, and everyone started using the phrase. They'd say, oh, I felt I returned to the little town in my heart. And I was so overwhelmed by the fact that my granddaughter was influencing a yoga class in Munich. I was overwhelmed. But anyway, so I told my daughter-in-law this, and she wrote me an email, and she said, Ozma says, don't forget the most important part. And she said that to her mother, and her mother said, what's the most important part? And she said, well, you have to sing your own song. You have to sing your own heart song, because that's the only way you find your way back to the little town in your heart. So I'm so grateful for the gift that this practice has given us, that gift that allows us to sing our own heart song, allows us the room to return to the place in our heart, to bring an attitude of acceptance and prayer and love to our practice. So it's with great gratitude that I continue in this practice, and I welcome all of you into this family of Yin Yoga. So thank you all so much. And